All right, guys, let's get started for this morning. We have the pleasure of welcoming Neville Pearce, the Chief Operating Officer of Coliban Water. Quick introduction to Neville. So Neville got his Masters in Business at RMIT and further improved on his knowledge and skills by completing an AICD Company Directors Course. He's been the Chief Operating Officer in Coliban Water since December 2012. His job is to oversee the operations and infrastructure group at Coliban Water. This includes raw water management, water and sewer operations, including asset management, major contract management, infrastructure planning and design, infrastructure delivery. Neville has a very clear vision on how he wants his teams to look. Knowing the skills and capabilities within the team is crucial to building a solid team. He's always tried to achieve that. When new staff joins, he moves quickly to ensure the staff are onboarded thoroughly in an educative way. He's a top operator, quick thinker, loves challenging people around him to enhance their growth. He's been a guest speaker at the Trobe University for many years, and he's been quite influential in our governing bodies for engineering courses here. So please join me in welcoming Neville Pearce.
Appreciate it. For my benefit, Eddie mentioned a number of you have come up from Melbourne. Who's from Melbourne? Who's from? Okay, right in front of Melbourne, which is great. I just wanted to share a few insights with you today, and I'm happy to explore anything that you would like to explore. If I'm covering things that doesn't interest you, then can I suggest you let me know, because I don't want to waste your time, and if I'm standing up the front here talking about stuff that you're not interested in hearing about, that's actually wasting my time as well. So if I'm covering things that you're uninterested in, by all means let me know and I can talk about lots of other things. I'd like to share with you some of the insights that I've received, as I mentioned, over my life, and also welcome any questions or comments as we go during the presentation. I don't want you to necessarily wait till the end to cover any of the information or ask that burning question at that time in time. Eddie invited me to come and talk about what you need to know to be being effective at the workplace. Prior to that, I'll just give you a bit of context about me. As Eddie said, I've had heavy involvement with Trobe University for a long time. I'm on the Industry Advisory Committee. Active involvement with the redefining of the engineering course over a number of years. Heavily involved with the reaccreditation from engineers. Just let me know. Long time involvement. Born and grew up in Bendigo. Came here and did my degree. Unfortunately, when I did it, you could only do 2 years here at the Bendigo CAE at the time, and I had to go and do the final 2 years in Ballarat, but started and did my degree in Bendigo as well. So having an affinity with the college back there, but also with the Trobe University. COO, Chief Operating Officer. The best way to describe that, I've almost been doing that role for 10 years at Coliban Water, is anything you think that's to do with operations that fits within my portfolio. So when you talk finance, corporate services, HR, they're things that don't fit in my portfolio. But when you're talking infrastructure design, project delivery, long-term planning, water resource management, IT, including SCADA for operational systems, asset management information systems, the geographical information system, all fit under the operational portfolio. So anything to do with operations generally fits within my roles and responsibilities. As Eddie had mentioned, I've done the Company Directors Course. I would highly recommend that as you go through your career, and gives you valuable insight in dealing with boards and the directions of the company overall. I know when I was at your stage of life coming out, I thought it'd be great to work within an organisation and you look up to the head of the organisation, managing director or chief executive officer. They set the strategy of the company. What I've come to realise over the nearly 30 years I've worked in the industry is that's not necessarily the case. You think we'll aspire to get to the top of the organisation, to be the head of the organisation. When you get to the head of the organisation, effectively you're delivering the strategy for a board of directors. So realistically, you say, oh, well, I'll become the chair of the board of directors and I'll be the head of the organisation. Well, when you look at the water corporations, and I'll cover this a little bit later, when you're chair of a water corporation, you're answering to government. So it doesn't matter where you get to in the organisational hierarchy, you're always generally answering to somebody to say, this is where we need to go. I'm also a board director on the AWA Alliance Bank. You say, okay, what's that got to do with my skills and expertise as an engineer? A lot, actually, in terms of it is around finance, but it's sitting around a board table, focusing on the strategic issues and setting the strategic direction of an organisation. And when you look at my role as Chief Operating Officer, that's primarily one of the key functions that I have, is saying, okay, where the government wants us to head, where the board wants us to head, how do we actually deliver on that strategy and how we achieve that strategy is one of the key functions. I've worked in the water industry, only in the water industry since I graduated, so I've been in the water industry for about 30 years, but I've been at Coliban Water for the last 10. Prior to that, I was at Barwon Water based in Geelong and Central Highlands Water based in Colorado.
Can you tell us what zero emissions water is?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. When I graduated, I thought, yep, I'm a civil and structural engineer, work with pipes, pump stations. What I'm finding now, 30 years down the track, is I have probably just as much involvement with energy that I do with the pipes, pumps and everything. It's not about being an electrical engineer, but it's about having your eye on the ball in terms of the government policy is set that says we need to have a 40% reduction in carbon emissions from the state government by 2025, and by 2050 we have to be carbon neutral. So we're implementing things at Coliban Water to be able to deliver on those commitments that we've provided to the government overall. What does that mean for me? Zero emissions water, the water corporations have all got together. There's 19 altogether, but 13 out of the 19 have all got together to set up a special purpose joint venture, and we've all got different, it's equivalent to shares, but different entitlements in that joint venture, and we've entered a contract with a solar providing company in northwest Victoria that's going to provide us solar energy for the next 10 years with an option to extend beyond that. So I'm a board director of Zero Emissions Water, which is saying we're buying power for the long term for the next 10 years to be able to supply that at zero emissions. The other link with that I mentioned is when I did my engineering degree, we were heavily involved in accounting and finance, which was great. But this is another step in that direction as well, where you're dealing with complex financial arrangements in terms of, it's a bit like betting in the stock market, where you're hedging to say, if your energy bills are up here, but you put a hedge in that's down here, then you benefit from what you're achieving in that. But if the energy bills are here and you've hedged here, then you've got a cost. So it's like trying to forecast where you think energy costs are going to go for the next 3, 6, 12 months, 2 years, up to 3 years. And depending on how well you bet, then you could be in the positive or you could be in the negative. So dealing with financial instruments and all that as part of that is quite complex as well. I wouldn't have anticipated when I was graduating that I'd be necessarily involved in this. Great opportunity for me. What do I plan to cover today? And there's a range of things that's up there. I want to ask you a few questions in terms of what does it actually mean to you in wanting to be an engineer in the future. I'll share some of my thoughts overall. Then I wanted to just cover a number of key things: communications, risk management, cost analysis, business project proposals, legal insights, all just my perspectives and my thoughts. If any of you require any further information and want to discuss any of those in more detail or at length, by all means, give me a ring, and I'll hand out a card to anyone at the end that wants my card. But I'm happy to have any further discussion with anyone in the room as well. Just give me a call. How long have I got, Eddie, today? You want me to finish about what time?
5 to
5 to 12?
Yep.
No worries at all. So I need to make sure I allow enough time for questions. But as I said, any questions as you go, please ask. The reason why I've got this picture up there is, and I think we're in a unique space at the present time where we're all talking about innovation and other different ideas. As engineers sitting in the room, what they teach us at university, lots of skills, lots of expertise, but I distill it down into one thing as that I pick up from the slide. There's lots of information, but what the university is teaching you to do is a way to think. You can go and you can learn structural engineering, you can learn electrical engineering, you can do hydraulics, you can do lots of different things. The common denominator with all that is problem solving, but thinking things about things logically and a way to think and how to resolve problems. Come up with ideas, how you implement things overall. If I was to say one thing that I got out of my 4 years at university, because I've been to the first year I was out, I thought, it's bullshit. I've done 4 years of training and all I'm using is 6 weeks of everything that I did at school. But it wasn't about the 6 weeks, it was about what they actually taught me in here to be able to make the decisions, follow through. It's a way of thinking. And as an engineer, when you graduate, that's the main thing that the university taught you about the 4 years. The second slide that I've got here links back to innovation, particularly where we are at this point in time too. And we often see, and I don't know whether you've heard of it, but the Productivity Commission in Canberra has done a numerous amount of reports that say our productivity of a nation is deteriorating. Well, how do we actually improve that so we get greater productivity? It's about doing more with less, essentially, and innovation is the way that we can do more with less. It's about looking at things that we do and doing them differently. If you can think of something that's innovative and do it differently and can do it faster, better, stronger in terms of when you work with a business, then that's ticking all the boxes for what we're doing with innovation. And for those of you that are student members of Engineers Australia, you would see there is a very heavy emphasis through the engineering profession at this point in terms of creating the innovation. There's been a number of stories probably over the last 12 months that are all focusing on the innovations that are coming from the engineering profession overall. The way I'd summarise what I've seen in the last 12 months is we actually have the power and we have the knowledge and capability to influence this substantially, and that's where a lot of the innovation is going to come from. You in the room. It's the best way I would describe that. The other one we talked about was decision making, and this is a really good slide to demonstrate the amount of different information that you need to take on board and distill as a graduate engineer to be able to make decisions and prioritise things. You see lots of words up there. It's what the hell's healthcare got to do with the water industry? The way we're looking at it in the water industry is doctors are great, and that's fantastic. They may save one life a year, maybe 2 if they're lucky or whatever, and they're great. There's no problems there. But when you think about what happens within the water industry, if we didn't have clean water and sanitation to take it away, we would have hundreds of thousands of people dying just in Bendigo. And so you think about the amount of lives that the water industry saves every day, and you want to make a difference. That's why I work in the water industry, because I want to make a difference to people in their day-to-day lives. It's about healthcare. If you can provide preventative services up front, you avoid people being in the health industry, you avoid all the costs that come with it, all the reactive response for people being ill. You get rid of all that, it's far cheaper to do things preventatively up front. So that's why you see healthcare, there's decisions, there's requests, you need to implement things, you've got demands. How you prioritise that with the budget, do things ethically. You've got a bombardment of information as an engineer, and you need to be able to distill all that information and prioritise what you think needs to be done to be delivered on the objectives that are set for the organisation strategically. If you were to learn one other thing during university that I would encourage you to, and I would find that this is probably the biggest gap I see that graduates come and work with us, is whilst you might do lots of different assignments and exams and all that at uni, that's great, but they really don't know how to prioritise things. When you get out into the workplace, you are constantly bombarded with 10 to 15 things. You turn up this morning, you say, oh yeah, I need to work on this, and this, and by 10 o'clock in the morning you're working on 15 to 20 other different things that you may have thought didn't even exist. So you're constantly reprioritising things, constantly saying, what is the most important thing for me to do today? And when you sit there, the link to that as well is you need to be anticipating what is to come in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Because you might be doing a project that says, I need this information from the finance department, or I need this information from IT, but I don't need it for 3 weeks, and then so you get to that through, it's, IT, I'd like this information. Oh, well, that's going to take us 3 or 4 weeks to collate together. So you need to be second guessing what you need 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in advance, and having those discussions with the respective people to prioritise, well, I need this in about a month's time. How long is it going to take you to do it? Well, just giving them advance warning and getting things in early so that it doesn't necessarily hold you up overall. So if you can learn how to prioritise and multitask in terms of anticipating things in the future, then you tick the box as well as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that I can't stress enough, and I probably get exposed to this every day. I constantly hear engineers cannot communicate. Engineers aren't people. Engineers are propeller heads with geeks overall. They don't know how to do that. I would challenge you to prove people wrong in that space. Even though I hear it every day, there is a belief that we can't communicate. There's a belief when you talk about stakeholder engagement that you've got to go to the communications team and get their help to go to a community meeting and all that, because as engineers we can't do that. I know we can, and it's not necessarily in our comfort zone for each of us to do that, but to be a good engineer, you need to be able to communicate. Whether it's by writing, whether it's by reports, whether it's by presenting to the board, whether it's community meetings, it's up to you what you need to work out, but you need to be able to communicate as an engineer. If you've got a project, as you can see there, and you can't communicate, there's one sure way to ensure that it's never delivered, and that's not being able to communicate. The slide I've got up there, I think, summarises a number of things that I said, and you can see all the words there, whether it's believe or whether it's working in the team or inspiring or imagining, discovering things, inventing things. The signs you choose whichever way you want to go. You have the choice as individuals sitting in the room. Where you go, where you want to end up is totally your choice, but it links back to all the things I just mentioned in the previous 3 or 4 slides. That's my thoughts in terms of engineering, what does it actually mean. So you have the choice. Overall, I think you could choose to become a technical specialist if you wanted to, and you can work in modelling, you could do structural engineering, design, I love doing that, and that's great. But you can also choose being a manager of people as well. As we mentioned before, doesn't matter what you choose to do, you are always in a leadership role, as I mentioned. And the Engineers Australia has the tag Engineers Make It Happen, and I truly believe that. I think we do, but the choice is yours. Where you want to end up, it's really up to you to decide. So just a bit of the boring stuff. Coliban Water, Water Corporation, 1992, governed by a board of directors, and I will cover the organisational hierarchy to give you an idea how we fit in. Established by the board of directors appointed by the Minister of Water. We're one of 19. We have just around 2,000 of sewer mains, 2,000 k's of water mains. You can see the numbers there, sewer pump stations, water reticulation. And also water treatment plants, water factory, we produce recycled water, Class A. We also have an irrigation channels, very small one, but we've got about 1,500 customers in the irrigation network we supply for irrigation purposes. Could be hobby farms, it can be for the proper horticultural farms, but also recreational lifestyle businesses as well.
Would you be able to explain the difference between a water reclamation plant, a water treatment plant, and a recycled water factory?
Yes, easy. And you hear lots of things being taught. A water treatment plant is a water treatment plant. They never interchange the terminology for a water treatment plant. But when you get to the other end of the system, when you're talking sewage, so the liquid that goes down the pipe, the definition of that is it's sewage. But it gets complex in terms of when you've got an industry discharging, it's considered trade waste. So it's a wastewater product. So the wastewater mixed with the sewage, and you end up at a sewage treatment plant. You often hear it termed about sewerage. That's the infrastructure. Instead of sewage, it's sewerage. So sewerage is the infrastructure. That's the pipes, pump stations, the treatment plant. So it used to be called sewerage treatment plants. But then that became a bit on the nose in terms of, no pun intended, not really glamorous in terms of, oh, we don't like talking about sewage or sewerage or anything. What other name can we give it? So all of a sudden it popped up and it's a water reclamation plant. It's no different to a sewage treatment plant. It's just a different word with the ponds people filled up. It's better to sell recycled water. And so when we talk about a recycled water factory, it's just an extended version of the sewage treatment plant to treat it to a higher quality. It's a recycled water factory, it's a water reclamation, a Class A plant, just different terminology.
Who are the main users of the recycled water?
Most of it is, we've got irrigation customers, 2 channels that we provided in, and they use it for irrigation for agricultural purposes, and City Grade Bendigo exporting recreation reserves, the QEO, the botanical gardens, those kind of things. So there's some smaller customers, but they're the primary.
What happens to the solids from the recycled water?
We've got the treatment plant at Epsom produced an activated sludge treatment plant, so it's utilising the natural bacteria within the treatment plant to purify the liquid, and so it grows what's called biomass within the activated sludge plant. That then needs to be so much wasted. It's like a population of people where you need to essentially kill off or die some of that population of biomass every day, because they're reproducing and generating new biomass if you don't get rid of it. So we have a separate sludge treatment or biomass treatment facility, and that biomass gets dewatered and then reused in agriculture at Dingy at the present time from Epsom, and we're undertaking trials to see if it could possibly have beneficial use for other agricultural purposes. So once that activated sludge process treats the water, it's basically, you look at it in a glass, it looks no different to drinking water, it's still got impurities in it, that's where all the solids goes. So Coliban Water pretty well covers, that's the region there, from Trentham or down Kyneton near the bottom of the middle of the state, up to the Murray River, and out to the west at Wedderburn, and out to the right, shooting out Manchester, give you the size of the region. This is the organisational chart or structure for Coliban Water. So you can see up the top there, we report to the board. On the board, there's the chair. Managing Director Jeff reports to the board overall, and then we've got general managers or different CFO. Me, it's the CFO. So you can see service and infrastructure. That's the area that I look after. So there's 6 key areas of responsibility overall. To give you an idea, lots of different functions, lots of different roles and responsibilities. About 60% of the staff within Coliban Water sit within the service and infrastructure team. So the best way I would describe how it's delivered is if we're providing core services for water and sewage provision, 60% of the staff work on that. The other 40% are working in the support areas like finance, corporate service, communications, customer service. We've established, whilst we have those 6 key areas, we've established a leadership team. So there's a number of people who look after those 6 areas of responsibilities, one of them being myself, but there's others in there like people and safety, information, digital and cyber, and policy, risk and compliance. They are cross-functional responsibilities. So whilst they might fit under one of the 6 key areas, if you're in the risk area, you've got responsibility right across the organisation because risk involves the whole lot of the organisation. Similarly, IT, the whole lot of the organisation. When we do project proposals at Coliban Water, nothing gets off the ground unless it gets approved through the structure you just saw. We have a committee called the Investment Review Committee, and unless you've written a project proposal that details the risk, the complexity, the impact on the stakeholders, what's the benefits, what's the urgency, what's the dependency on other projects, what are the financial implications, then your project is never going to get off the ground. So this links back to what I said before about it's essential for you to be able to communicate, in this example, in writing, effectively, succinctly, sell your message, get it off the ground, and it'll get implemented. If you can't do that, it'll never fly, not even in Coliban Water. When we go through the delivery of a project, and you should be able to see that, which is surprising. But in terms of how we deliver projects at Coliban Water, we go through the phases at the top: conceptualise, prove, procure, deliver and close. So it's not just about constructing a project, it's not just about building things. If you were talking about building things, yep, it primarily fits in this area here. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done prior to that, and you can see all the different components: need statement, business case, risk assessment, MPV, benefit assessment, technical specification, project management plan, stakeholder management plan. There's lots of different components that need to be delivered and successfully communicated and approved prior to any project being implemented. Once it's built, then the project doesn't even finish at that point because you're over into the close out of the project, where I put my hand up and say, I've done a benefits realisation of a team, and I don't have a problem sharing this. At Gunbower, at the north of the state, we had a problem with blue-green algae. And blue-green algae was coming into the water treatment plant. It was a membrane plant. The cells of the blue-green algae, so it links back to science backgrounds, but cells of blue-green algae were being smashed on the membranes, So the membranes actually filter all the particles out and clean water on the other side. So because they are being smashed, the toxins, which can kill you and I, were passing through the treatment plant and ending up at the customer's tank. Really significant issue, and so we upgraded the treatment plant. Great. That's the main reason why, when you look at the way back here, why were we doing the upgrade on the treatment plant? The main driver was to fix the problem with the cells being smashed on the plant. So we built a beautiful plant up there, produces very high quality water. We don't have blue-green algae every year, but when we did get the first blue-green algae problem 3 years after the plant had been built, I said, that's right, we're good. We've got a treatment plant that can treat blue-green algae now. And I found out that the project that was built could not treat blue-green algae. So whilst we had justified a project to start off with, when you looked at the end with the benefits realisation, the plant couldn't even treat the water with the blue-green algae. So I look at it and go, well, that's a really great project, isn't it? Because it didn't produce great water and everything normally, but it still can't even treat the blue-green algae. So when you do the benefits realisation, that's why it's important at the end to say, what did we set out to achieve and what did we actually deliver? Because they could be two different things. And sometimes you don't get it right. Sometimes you do. Most of the time you hope you do, but sometimes you don't get it right.
What are some of the major struggles you have before you get to that building phase? Like, what are the biggest setbacks that you come across?
Biggest one I've found in my career is funding. If you can't get funding, and a really good example is the Millennium Drought, particularly for the water industry, started in 2000 and went through to 2011. During that time, Coliban Water started with pretty well 0 borrowings, and now we owe $370 million. The reason why we are 370 million is we had to build a lot of infrastructure and a lot of projects that we couldn't fund internally from our revenue base. And so normally it would be, no, we can't afford to do that, we can't afford to do that. When you are running out of water, and our prime service that we offer to customers is providing drinking water, we just had to borrow that money, and it's still costing us now. It'll cost us for the next 55 years until we pay all that back. That's how long it will take to pay back. We're currently paying about $30 million in interest only every year without paying back any of the principal. Yeah, so it's primarily the biggest challenge is finances. Cost estimating. There's a range of things you get taught at university, and we cover a number of, you can work the cost estimates from the ground up, the number of hours that people require, the number of materials that are required. Generally at Coliban Water, we don't do that. So we look at and say, yep, you can do that, but again, it's back to most of it, as it says, is estimates. So we turn around and say, okay, we might have built this tank 3 years ago. We went out to tender, we got the price for that, to build that tank. Well, we know what it cost 3 years ago. Rather than go back to first principles and re-estimate the whole lot, let's just pick up the price and escalate it with CPI, and we've got an estimate of where we think it needs to be. So it's more efficient, more cost effective for people's time to do that. And it also depends on the status of the project that you go through. When you start off doing cost estimates for projects, and you'll learn this over time, there is more uncertainty, there's more risk associated at the start of the project. You may say, we've got to do this, and it's just an idea at the start. It could go 100 million different ways to the start, but as you get further and further into the project and it gets refined down, the options and the risk and variance is like a funnel that you're going through. It becomes less and less, and then your estimates get more and more accurate the closer you get to the final design, up to the point where you go out to tender. That's the best estimate that you can at that point when you test the market. When we estimate for cost for projects, we look at the direct cost, as I just mentioned, the tender cost, indirect cost. That's about doing the design, that's about doing the consultant, if you engage one to do the design. They're really the primary costs. Supervision of construction, they're the primary costs. Then we say, okay, we have to supervise that project overall. We've got internal costs, which ends up with a likely cost. Then we've got contingencies and uncertainty. So contingencies are, you might get things with a cost estimate plus or minus a little bit, that's okay, but you need to price in risk. So you turn around and say, okay, we're going to build something in this treatment plant at this site. The contractor, when he looks at it, goes, oh, there's planning permit required with that. That planning permit might take 2, 3 or 4 years to get. It might only take 12 months, but there's a big risk with that. That means that I could have my guys out of work, not doing anything, they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs. That's a big risk to me. If I was to win this job, because of that risk, I need to add $500,000 to it. They price what the actual risk is, so we need to be able to estimate that risk as well. Which is quite difficult, but you get a little bit more experience, you get a little bit more better understanding of what private industry pricing risk. The other thing that links back to what we're talking about with the loans, because we owe so much money at Coliban Water, cost forecasting is imperative to the success day to day. So you look at it and say, okay, as an engineer, I've learned all these skills. All Neville's talked about is finance today. Why didn't I go and do an accountant degree overall? I probably couldn't, but that's okay. Everyone's different. But the finances really drive the success of the organisation as well. We need to be able to predict with forecasting, and you can see there if your accurate forecast is in the middle, but if you're over and under, borrowings may not be available, we may have to pay too much interest, we may not have enough capital if we under forecast, so it's like a balancing act with the finances. So you will be heavily involved with finances as an engineer. When you're delivering projects, you don't need to be a lawyer either, but you do need to understand contractual clauses that are there. That a lot of the team that's in the delivery of the projects at Coliban Water, they write the contractual clauses. So whilst they're not lawyers, they're actually writing the contractual clauses. They know, as a project engineer, you know what the outcome is. You are learning what the risk is, so you're writing clauses to address that risk and achieve the outcomes that you want. Lawyers essentially write what you ask them to write. So whenever I've sat down with, we use Ashurst in Melbourne, whenever I sit down with the lawyers at work, all they're doing is extracting the knowledge and information out of your head and being able to put it in words that the lawyers are really comfortable with, and then they give the information back to you. Essentially, that's what the lawyers are doing for most of the contracts we have. As I said, the project engineers are generally writing clauses. So you could say you need a legal understanding. Yes, you need to be able to interpret contract clauses. You need to be able to write some of those contract clauses, but you don't need to be a lawyer. The last stop point I've got there is some of you may find, and under Australian standards appointed to oversee the contract, that superintendent is independent. So what I mean by independent is you may employ a contractor to deliver you a project. A great example of this was that down at Harcourt when we were modernising the rural system down there. It was anticipated that we were going to hit rock, but we didn't anticipate that there was going to be huge amounts of rock that was down there. So the contractor said, oh, this was unfair. When we priced this, we weren't anticipating on all the information we provided, we weren't anticipating that amount of rock. On the other side, Coliban Water saying, yep, that's okay, but we gave you all the information, we showed you that there was going to be rock there. Was that foreseeable that you should have estimated for that amount of rock? The superintendent was employed by Coliban Water and he's a staff member of Coliban Water. He's sitting there independently and impartial to say, yeah, well, I hear what the contractor's saying, I hear what Coliban Water's saying, now I need to make a decision what should be paid, what shouldn't be paid. So you're actually getting people in your roles as potential superintendent for some of you in that space, making those independent, impartial decisions. Sometimes they go bad, and it did at Harcourt. The decision was made, and the contractor ended up taking us to arbitration and testing the decisions that was there, but the independence of that person stood firm, and the contractor was not awarded a single cent, and all costs went to him as well. So it's testing your ethics, integrity, morals as an individual when you have to stand in the middle and make a decision based on what is considered fair and reasonable for both the contractor and for the client being Coliban Water. So that's some of the legal things that you might need to be aware of. Risk management, as I've covered before, the effect over uncertainty, positive outcome presents an opportunity. If I was to show you the next picture that's here, it's a good way to describe the risk and the tolerance. If you're standing in the middle of the green area, you could have a creek on the left, on your right-hand side. On the left, there could be a road, and if you're sitting in that area, you may have young children. You don't want them to wander too far out to fall in the creek or get run over in the road. So you turn around and say, okay, well, I've got this yellow zone, green zone. You can play anywhere within the green zone. I'm happy with that. Or you play anywhere within the yellow zone. I'm a bit cautious about that, but as soon as you go in the red zone, I'm waving the flag saying, hey, come back here, you're getting too close. So that defines how much your tolerance is. But depending on the level of risk appetite you have, you may be so averse with risk that you are operating pretty well right in the middle of the square. And what I would put to you in that case is, if you do that, you're missing an opportunity, because unless, as an engineer in future, you are prepared to take some risks, and unless you're prepared to manage those risks and control those risks, there will never be a positive outcome. If you're so risk averse that, you don't want to do anything, well, you'll sit down, you'll not get in your car and drive home at the end of the day, because there is a risk of you having an accident. When you go, after this discussion, go and get in your car to drive home, you could all have an accident. Not that I want you to, but individually you've done that risk assessment. You go, well, the benefits of me getting to where I need to go rather than walking is huge compared to the risk of me having a car accident, so therefore I'm prepared to take that risk. So there is always benefits. If you don't take the risk, you will never receive any benefits. I mentioned a lot of this before earlier on, but the other thing I would highlight in terms of project management is stakeholder management. And you will have lots of stakeholders, customers that have significant power, low power or high power versus low or high interest in the project. So when you're delivering a project, when you're writing a business case, as I mentioned before, a project proposal, you need to go and develop a stakeholder management plan that identifies what is the level of interest for stakeholders and what is their power to be able to influence it. If you've got someone who's really interested and can change the outcome of your project, I would be suggesting to you that you have them in your stakeholder management plan, that you are regularly dealing with them and keeping them on board, up to date with what you're doing, because if they can influence what's going to happen and they have a significant interest and they don't agree with what your project is, again, it'll never get off the ground. Whereas you spend less time working on people with low interest and low ability to do it, but you might just inform them of what's going on. So what we do at Coliban Water is we've got what's called the IACD spectrum of public participation, and depending on where you fit in that matrix, if someone is pretty well a high power and a high interest, you're involving them, collaborating them, or even empowering them to be able to make the decision, and then they feel involved. Whereas someone with low interest, you're really only informing them what's going on. So we go through and we develop, as part of project management, a list of all the stakeholders, a stakeholder management plan, and we determine what level of consultation each one of those stakeholders requires. Prioritisation and competing deadlines. This comes back to what I mentioned before about how well you manage competing deadlines, how well you prioritise, and faced with these competing demands, that will directly influence how successful you are in your career. The only bit that I would add to it is it's really got to be a balance. That I see a lot of people essentially at the end of the day, and it's really work-life balance, a bit of a misnomer, but it is about whatever the appropriate balance is for you as an individual, because you can't work all the time and you can't play all the time, so at the end of the day one supports the other. But it's about having that right balance, and if you can manage the competing deadlines at work, it also helps you manage the competing deadlines in your personal life as well. At the end of the day, as I said, you're the master of your destiny. If I was to leave you with 3, 4 or 5 things that were there, I would be suggesting you need to enjoy what you do. I can look back on 30 years and say, I have not done one role that I haven't thoroughly enjoyed. And I didn't mention one thing on the very opening slide, but I live in Geelong. And so I commute to Bendigo, 2 hours here every day and 2 hours home every day. So I spend 20 hours a week in the car. If I didn't enjoy what I was doing, I wouldn't be spending 20 hours a week in the car. So I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and if I don't, then it's time to change. So I would advise you, if you're not enjoying what you do, think seriously about what you're doing. Develop your skills as graduates when you first come out. If you get sound engineering skills, sound experience in the first 3, 4 or 5 years, you will use them for the rest of your life, and that is a good investment in my opinion. You need to set goals for yourself. I often ask people when in an interview or even at work, what are you going to be doing in the next 5 years? What are you going to be doing in the next 10 years? Shit, I don't know. Well, if you don't know what you're going to be doing in the next 10 years, and they call it a Merlin exercise, but if you say, I want this role or this job in the next 10 years, or if you say in 5 years, well, I need this role, and that means in 2 years I need this role, which means in 1 year, in 1 year I know that I should be doing this, or this to get to where I need to go in the next 5, 10 years. Some people don't like that. I would be recommending to you to say, that's important to me, which helps you develop your own strategic plan for you and your career. And the last one I've got there is really seek out a mentor and speak to someone to help and guide you through. I would have had probably 5 or 6 mentors during the 30 years that I've worked in the industry. And finally, the future is in your hands. It's totally up to you. Thank you.